Stellar Blade 2 is officially coming, and that changes everything. That's right, Stellar Blade 2 is happening. It's properly, officially confirmed. No blurry screenshots, no cryptic job listings. Shift Up themselves have acknowledged that the sequel is already in development. And if that wasn't enough to raise a perfectly arched eyebrow, the original Stellar Blade is also getting a full PC release, opening the floodgates for a whole new wave of players to experience what made the game such a surprise sensation. Not bad for a debut console title from a studio no one expected to go toe-to-toe with the genre's biggest names. Stellar Blade was easily one of the biggest crowd pleasers of last year. So, what exactly happened here? How did an ultra-stylized, high-octane action game that many first dismissed as eye candy wind up being one of the most talked about games of 2024? And more importantly, what does this success tell us about what gamers are actually looking for right now? With that said, let's dive into the rise of Stellar Blade, its journey from underdog to breakout hit, and why its sequel is already shaping up to be one of the most anticipated games on the horizon. I am Lady Decade. If you love stylish gaming content, hit that subscribe button, as this is why we're getting another Stellar Blade already. Stellar Blade 2 is on its way, and in my opinion, this fact deserves celebrating. Shift Up, the South Korean developer behind the original, has quietly confirmed that a sequel is already in development and could be released as early as 2026, which would mark a surprisingly quick turnaround for a modern action RPG, especially one that was Shift Up's first proper console title. This comes at an interesting moment for the series, as the original Stellar Blade, which launched in 2024 as a PlayStation 5 exclusive, is finally making its way to PC. That version includes new content, performance upgrades, and a handful of features that weren't available the first time around. If you've been holding out for Stellar Blade on PC, this is the moment to strike. Not only is the game finally coming to PC, but you can pre-order right now and save big. Grab either the standard or complete edition using my link, and you'll get a massive 23% off. Yep, before it even launches. But that's not all. If you love visually stunning action games, and let's be honest, who doesn't? Then you need to check out Nier Automata, the gorgeous, genre-defining title that inspired Stellar Blade's combat and style. Right now, you can get 55% off the PC version, or go portable with 67% off the Nintendo Switch version. Use my links in the pinned comment and save up to 90% on thousands of games, but don't wait. These deals vanish faster than your health bar on hard mode. Every purchase helps support what I do, and if you want to go even further, you can get behind the scenes content, my full cosplay archive, and even more over on Patreon. Happy spending, and I hope you enjoy today's video. While some players are just about to be getting their first taste of Stellar Blade thanks to the upcoming PC release, others are already setting their sights on what comes next, and what's coming looks seriously ambitious. Stellar Blade 2 isn't just a simple follow-up, it's reportedly being developed with a broader platform strategy from the outset, potentially launching on PC, Xbox, and even the upcoming Switch successor right from day one. But it's not just about where it will land. It's about how it's evolving. Early reports suggest the sequel might swap the desolate wastelands of the original for a sleeker, more urban sci-fi setting, hinting at a major thematic shift. In short, Shift Up aren't just making another Stellar Blade, they're redefining what the franchise can be. But that does raise a very important question. How do we know all of this? Stellar Blade 2 wasn't announced with a dramatic teaser or a stage reveal. It was quietly confirmed in Shift Up's investor presentation, buried between growth projections and headcount figures. According to their report, development is already underway with a 2026 release target, as stated earlier. An unusually quick turnaround for a sequel of this scale, especially given how long the original took to develop. But it's not just the timing that's ambitious. The sequel also appears to be expanding in scope. Internal materials refer to it as an urban sci-fi action RPG, which suggests a change in tone and setting, like we briefly touched on a moment ago. Of course, the original's mix of ruined wastelands and futuristic bunkers may be giving way to something more city-based, potentially with greater verticality and traversal, which would be a logical response to feedback about the first game's platforming. There's also speculation that the story will directly follow the PC version's additional content. In one scene, Eve drops a memory stick, something that didn't appear in the original ending. It's a small moment, but one that could be hinting at larger themes for the sequel, possibly involving the Sentinels, Mother Sphere's deeper motivations, or even Eve's own hybrid nature. Clearly, a lot is going on at Shift Up at the moment, which might have you wondering, how are they managing all of this? So, it's said that behind the scenes, the company is scaling up to match its ambitions. They're increasing staff numbers significantly to support not just Stellar Blade 2, but also Project Witches, another major title they have scheduled for 2027. Whether this means shared assets or simply two big projects running in parallel isn't clear, but the pressure is definitely on. All of this means that Stellar Blade 2 isn't just a follow-up, it's a test. A chance to refine what's worked, fix what didn't, and prove that Shift Up can deliver on the expectations they've set for themselves. The sequel isn't just about bigger environments or better combat, it's about whether this studio can cement Stellar Blade as more than a one-off success. But even if this franchise was a one and done, what an impact the stunning last game had. While its controversy may have stolen some headlines, Stellar Blade stood out for so much more than what its protagonist was, or wasn't, wearing. The game carved out a dedicated following among players who appreciated it for what it actually was. A stylish, mechanically robust action RPG with a clear identity and an unexpected level of polish, especially for a studio making its console debut. The comparisons to Nier Automata were immediate and not unfounded. Both games feature emotion-suppressing androids, a ruined Earth, and plenty of existential brooding. But while Nier leaned into ambiguity and narrative experimentation, Stellar Blade took a more traditional route. Its story was linear, its tone more grounded, and the emotional depth, well, it depended on which voice track you picked. But where it truly made its mark was in combat. If Nier was the inspiration for tone, the gameplay drew more from the likes of Sekiro and Bayonetta. Stellar Blade placed heavy emphasis on defensive timing, perfect parries, last-second dodges and counter-strikes, all feeding into his beta skill and burst combo systems. Mastery wasn't required to complete the game, but those who invested the time were rewarded with a rhythm-based combat flow that was fluid, aggressive and surprisingly technical. Boss fights in particular showcased what the system could do, with late-game encounters demanding real awareness and mechanical precision. Visually, Stellar Blade walked the line between dystopia and beauty. The environments ranged from industrial decay to neon-lit settlements, with plenty of cyberpunk aesthetics sprinkled throughout. Enemies, meanwhile, were grotesque hybrids of organic and mechanical forms, many of which were clearly designed to unsettle more than impress. There were flaws, of course. Platforming sequences were clumsy and often more frustrating than challenging. The English voice acting received mixed feedback, with some performances described fairly as flat or wooden, and characterization outside of Eve herself was fairly thin. But these weren't enough to overshadow what the game got right. At its core, Stellar Blade delivered something a bit rare in modern action games, a combat system that actually respected the player's ability to improve. It looked good, sure, but more importantly, it played well. It didn't need 200 side quests or open world fluff to justify its runtime. It just needed you, your sword, and some reflexes. Which is more than commendable in this day and age, especially for a title that for most appeared out the blue. This is because Stellar Blade had a slightly less conventional beginning than most high-profile action RPGs. Before shifting to console development, Shift Up was best known for mobile titles like Destiny Child and Goddess of Victory Nikki, games with strong visual identity and an even stronger appetite for microtransactions. When Project Eve was announced in 2019 as a multi-platform action RPG, it was met with a mix of curiosity and cautious optimism after all. a mobile developer declaring that they were suddenly going toe-to-toe with Bayonetta and Nier. That's not usually how these things go, but Shift Up didn't just bluff their way through. Sony saw potential early on and stepped in to support the project, eventually securing it as a PlayStation 5 timed exclusive. That partnership gave Shift Up access to motion capture studios, quality assurance, resources, and the kind of technical support that would have been otherwise out of reach. It also helped establish Stellar Blade as a tentpole release for the PS5, which, visually at least, it absolutely earned. The creative direction originated from studio founder Kim Hyung-tae, who previously served as art director on Blade and Soul. That influence is easy to spot, from the flowing hair physics to the elaborate, impractical yet iconic outfits. There's a definite aesthetic lineage, but with Stellar Blade, Kim wanted to take those stylistic roots and apply them to a different kind of game. One with real-time combat, emotional stakes, and narrative ambition. In terms of inspiration, Nier Automata was the clear narrative touchstone. Similarities can be strongly felt, but Stellar Blade is layered in its own unique blend of cyberpunk and anime influences, from Ghost in the Shell and Battle Angel Alita to Blade Runner 2049. Altogether, Stellar Blade was the production of a studio trying to prove that they could do more than flashy mobile designs and gacha monetization. And to their credit, they didn't just succeed, they created something recognizable, responsive, and distinctly their own. Unforgettable, in fact. But Stellar Blade made headlines for more reasons than just the gameplay. For a game about saving the remnants of humanity from biomechanical nightmares, Stellar Blade spent an awful lot of time being discussed for what its protagonist was wearing, or more often, what she wasn't. Eve's design ignited one of the most drawn-out debates in recent gaming memory, an argument not just about clothes, but about culture, intent, and where creative freedom ends and responsibility begins. At the centre of it all was the idea of the male gaze, the notion that Eve, with her hyper-stylised proportions and form-fitting outfits, was designed first and foremost to appeal to a straight male audience. Critics pointed out that even in a ruined world overrun by grotesque monsters, Eve somehow found time to dress like a cyberpunk runway model. Outfits like the skin suit, a tight bodysuit that reduced your defense stats, didn't exactly help shift perceptions. But that wasn't the whole story. Defenders of the design, including Shift Up themselves, argued that Eve's appearance was a deliberate artistic choice, grounded in Korean beauty standards and inspired by the anime I mentioned earlier. Studio head Kim Hyung-tae made it clear that Eve's stylization was part of her identity and not a mistake, and certainly not something they felt needed fixing. Still, that didn't stop a wave of controversy. When a Naughty Dog artist posted a more realistic reinterpretation of Eve on social media, complete with softer facial features and less overt sexuality, it triggered a wave of online scorn, with fans accusing Western developers of trying to homogenize global character design. The situation escalated even further when a small change to the holiday rabbit outfit, adding a lace detail to the chest area, was perceived as censorship. The hashtag Free Stellar Blades movement was born, with online petitions and hashtags accusing Sony of enforcing so-called woke standards on Korean developers. To make matters worse, in April 2024, IGN France published its review of Stellar Blade. Many international outlets, which focused on the game's mechanics, world building, and technical polish, took a radically different approach. One that would ignite a major backlash. The reviewer not only criticised the gameplay, but launched a scathing attack on the character design of Eve herself. In a now infamous section of the review, the author claimed that Eve's sexualised appearance, her tight-fitting bodysuit, exaggerated proportions, and stylised camera angles were so unrealistic and demeaning that it could make some women want to unalive themselves. This hyperbolic statement immediately drew widespread outrage, with many calling it reckless, offensive, and irresponsible. So yeah, the backlash was swift and fierce. Gamers and content creators flooded social media with criticism, accusing IGN France of moral grandstanding and projecting ideological concerns onto a game that was clearly rooted in Korean pop culture aesthetics, where hyper-stylized characters are the norm. Critics of the review argued that it grossly misrepresented the game, prioritising moral panic over honest critique, and used inflammatory language that trivialised mental health and body image struggles. The line about suicide in particular was called out as not only inappropriate but dangerous and sensationalist. So what began as a criticism of one bad review quickly spiralled into a full-blown culture war. Many gamers argued that reviews like this one exemplify how disconnected some journalists have become from the gaming audience, more interested in policing content than analysing it. Others viewed the review as part of a broader pattern, Western media applying puritanical or politically motivated frameworks to games created in entirely different cultural contexts. The situation escalated further when IGN France shut down comments and limited replies on social media, which many saw as an attempt to silence valid criticism. The review was beyond ridiculous. Meanwhile, other journalists and media figures jumped to IGN France's defence, framing the backlash as coordinated harassment from misogynistic or anti-woke factions of the gaming community. This only widened the divide, with players accusing the media of dismissing all dissent as toxic instead of addressing genuine concerns about the quality and focus of the review. What made the IGN France review even more contentious was the fact that Eve's design wasn't some abstract male fantasy, it was rooted in reality. The character was modelled directly after South Korean model Shin Jae-eun, as well as Ji-yeon Chae, who is Kim Hyung-tae's wife and fellow concept artist. Shin Jae-eun's proportions and posture were faithfully translated into the game, meaning Eve's appearance wasn't some exaggerated impossibility, but a stylized homage to a real woman. For many fans, this undercuts the argument that the character's design was harmful or unrealistic, especially since her visual presentation was framed through a cultural lens that embraced beauty and femininity rather than shaming it. In other words, the very thing IGN France deemed dangerous was ironically inspired by a living person who proudly embodies the same traits they claimed were unrealistic. So the Cellarblade incident ultimately became emblematic of the deepening rift between the gaming press and its audience. What could have been a routine critique became a cultural flashpoint, exposing how easily discussions around games can devolve into ideological warfare, especially when the critics use extreme rhetoric to make a point. And in this case, IGN France didn't just criticise the game, they sparked a global debate about body image, mental health, cultural interpretation, and the role of games in journalism itself. The irony is that for a game focused on stylized, over-the-top visuals, the conversation around Stellar Blades became very serious, very quickly. What started as a design preference evolved into a proxy war over artistic freedom, regional values, and the gaming industry's shifting cultural landscape. And like most culture war flashpoints, people quickly stopped arguing about the game itself and started using it as a stand-in for broader frustrations. Shift Up, for their part, didn't budge. The studio defended its creative decisions, doubled down on Eve's design, and, if anything, leaned even further into its fan service roots with post-launch content and crossover DLCs. Whether you see that as brave, stubborn, or just good business probably depends on how many YouTube thumbnails you've clicked on through this year. But basically, Shift Up saw the discourse, shrugged, and added a swimsuit DLC with ray-traced cleavage. Shift Up clearly leaned into all of this. In fact, over 15 officially licensed costumes were released, which frankly didn't leave a lot to the imagination. The developers themselves pushed cross-promotion, releasing collaboration DLC with Nier Automata and Goddess of Victory Nikki, two games with a similar talent for mixing emotional storytelling with high heels and short skirts. The crossover audience clearly ready and waiting. All of this just goes to show how Stellar Blades became more than a game. It became a look, a recognisable aesthetic. Eve had officially made her mark and quickly became one of the most recognisable gaming protagonists of 2024, with people still talking about this game regularly a full year later. So the upcoming PC version of Stellar Blade isn't just a second chance for people who missed out the first time around. It's a full relaunch, complete with technical upgrades, bonus content, and a few new headaches, just to keep things interesting. Launching on the 11th of June, the complete edition brings with it all the performance features you'd expect from a modern PC port. That includes the DLSS 4, AMD FSR 3, ultra-wide and super ultra-wide resolution support, and uncapped frame rates for those with more GPU than sense. There's also a new boss, man, leader of the Sentinels, alongside 25 extra outfits, a texture overhaul, and a few quiet teases that suggest the ending might not be quite as final as it first appeared. Nothing has been confirmed, but fans have already latched onto one particular scene in the updated trailer as a possible setup for a sequel or a hidden DLC trigger. Arriving on PC, Stellar Blade finally opens its doors to a broad audience, gives modders something very juicy to sink their teeth into, and most importantly, will let players experience the game without needing to cough up for a PS5. It's a win for accessibility, a win for performance, and an absolute goldmine for anyone with blender skills and zero restraint. This version will give the game room to evolve into what was always destined to become a full-blown multi-platform action franchise, with a Nexus mods page that's going to look like a digital strip club by the end of the week. Let's just say the PC modding community doesn't know the meaning of too much jiggle. With the PC version now acting as both a re-release and a soft relaunch, Stellar Blade 2 is already being positioned as the next step in a much larger plan. Development began immediately after the original shipped, and Shift Up aren't treating this like a small follow-up. They're treating it like a statement. Whether the sequel builds directly on the making new memories ending or splinters into something new remains to be seen. What's clear is that Shift Up isn't trying to do more of the same. With expanded team size, growing budgets, and a newfound foothold in the console space, they're aiming to push Stellar Blade 2 beyond its cult hit origins. Whether it sticks, the landing will depend on how well they refine the formula, but the ambition, at least, is hard to ignore. Also, don't forget, if you're waiting for Stellar Blade to hit PC, this is your moment, and you can pre-order right now using my link and save a whopping 23% off either the standard or complete edition before it even launches. And if you're a fan of slick, stylish action with a bit of emotional weight and a lot of very tight outfits, you owe it to yourself to check out Nier Automata 2, currently 55% off on PC, or a ridiculous 67% off if you want to play it on the go with the Switch version. Use the links in the pinned comment to save up to 90% on thousands of games. It helps support this very channel, and it lets you build your library without draining your wallet. And if you want to go one step further, you can join me on Patreon for behind the scenes content, exclusive videos, and full access to my cosplay archive. Thanks for watching, and remember, mod responsibly, or don't. I'm not your mum. See you soon.